Welcome to Veterans Connected, where maintenance and reliability expert and military veteran Eric Bevavino connects with fellow veterans in industry during each episode, where they exchange their experiences and discuss the transition from the military to industry and the paths and resources that led them to where they are today. The Veterans Connected podcast is proudly produced by the industry's leading network and learning community, Mobius Connect. Eric, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bevavino, host of the Mobius Connect podcast, focused on connecting military veterans to the maintenance and reliability community. Our aim here is to bridge the understanding gap between the military and civilian worlds, thereby improving the veteran transition journey and ultimately providing hope and a helping hand to any of our brothers and sisters out there struggling to find their way. We'll do this by interviewing veterans who have successfully made it through. For this session, we've chosen to interview one such Army veteran, Dave Vodarick, whose fascinating and patriotic story is a must listen for anyone interested in joining us on this mission. Welcome, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing today?
Oh, we're doing good. Just wrapping up the week here.
Yeah, wrapping up the week before a nice long 4th of July weekend. What could be better, right?
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. I know my sister and your wife are longtime friends, I think going back to high school, and that's sort of what brought us together. So I'm happy to be here. Why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do today and where you're at and what that's all about.
Sure. So I'm currently the co-owner of BV Contracting Solutions, which is a licensed general contractor out here in the Kansas City metro area. We focus primarily on property and facilities maintenance, remodels, rehabs. We don't get into new construction. So
Great. Well, I know in the maintenance and reliability community that I'm familiar with, facilities maintenance is a really, really big deal, whether it's at a pharmaceutical facility or an office park. And I think with the environmental standards that are increasingly forward thinking or, projecting towards new energy, I think that's a pretty interesting place to be. How did you end up getting there from your Army career?
Well, when I retired out in 2016, I took a job running commercial construction for plumbing and HVAC out here for a major mechanical contractor in town. About 2020, when we saw the downturn with COVID on the commercial space, my buddy, who was also the CEO at the company I was with, we made the jump, started our own company, and really focused it on the commercial space for property and facilities maintenance because we saw a gap there. So as a mechanical contractor running construction and service, we saw facilities managers and maintenance directors that were really struggling to know, number one, who to call for what. And if the product that they were receiving was even, one, what they needed, or two, was it up to the standard of what should be expected. Plus, we saw a lot of, I don't want to say gouging price-wise, but a lot of people overpaying for the services that they were receiving. So we saw that niche in the market and thought, we could come in as an all-encompassing organization so that maintenance director only has to call one person or one company to accomplish everything from general maintenance, handyman, all the way to specialty contracting, instead of them having to just call random people offline and hoping what they were getting was the right folks. So
interesting. So you're the one-stop shop broker for all things facilities maintenance, huh?
We are the one-stop shop. I think we've got in our list right now about 56 subcontractors in our network. We do run general maintenance, handyman services from internal to us. But really the core of it is we're helping people. So there may be some calls that we can take care of with the general maintenance or handyman that doesn't need a specialty contractor. But with us being licensed general contractors, if it escalates up to there, we're used to running subs, we're used to pulling permits. We can handle a tenant finish or a remodel for that same commercial customer. And it really cements the relationship between us and them, and really gives single source billing, single source point of contact if they have questions or want to discuss something. So.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. It also sounds like a dramatically different job description than perhaps the Army has, or what you did in the Army. Tell us a little bit about your experience in the service.
Sure. So I guess graduated high school out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, North Allegheny High School, enlisted in the Army Reserves as a way with the plan to pay for college. I attended Indiana University of Pennsylvania. They're just east of Pittsburgh. with the intent of going into ROTC anyways. I was lucky enough to be awarded a 3-year scholarship from the Army, which pulled me out of the reserves, but allowed me to focus on school. And I was commissioned in 1999 as an air defense officer for the United States Army. From there, went on active duty, served in North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne Division, went to school for the Armor Captain's Career Course at Fort Knox, with an assignment down to Fort Hood. Got some time after there up teaching ROTC up in Pennsylvania at Bethlehem University, which was a nice change, and really exposed me to a lot of things that I wasn't used to being exposed to, obviously with academia and working directly with civilians on a daily basis. And I'm reminded that these experiences I had across the Army really helped shape me to who I am today. So went back out to a tour. And so I guess I had went to Afghanistan with the 82nd in 2002, went to Iraq with the 1st Cavalry Division out of Fort Hood in 2004, had a tour with 10th Mountain back into Iraq, advising the Iraqi Army and Iraqi police forces, which was an interesting assignment. Did my schooling at Fort Leavenworth, and then back down to Fort Hood, where I was a brigade and battalion executive or operations officer, S3, and then back up here to Fort Leavenworth, where I retired out in 2016.
Nice. So how many total years is that? Keeping track.
So I did just under 18 on active duty. And we can kind of explain how that is. I ended up coming off active duty earlier than I expected, but it was good timing for me, and it's a good reminder. So I did not get picked up for 05. And it was during the drawdown. So they didn't want to keep all of us to 20. So they pushed us out to make sure that we were out underneath our 18. So we didn't stay till 20. And a lot of folks took that as they weren't happy with it. I, on the other hand, embraced it. I was ready for a change in my career. I was ready to get out and do something different. A little tired of the bureaucracy of the military at that point. So one of my things I like to tell folks is, you can dwell on the past or you can focus on the future. So if you're always going to dwell on what you didn't accomplish when you're in the military, it will stunt your ability to excel in the civilian world. And some folks just never get past that, and it really makes their transition difficult. So,
without a doubt, can't change the past. The only thing you can change is the future.
Absolutely.
Right. Always be looking forward. So I think in our previous conversation, so were you an airborne ranger then, or how did that all work? You were associated with it.
Yes, I was not never ranger school qualified, but I did serve with the 82nd Airborne Division with my air defense battalion, and supported 2nd Brigade, 82nd Airborne, and then 3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne. And that's who I deployed to Afghanistan with in 2002. So
fantastic. Very cool. Well, thank you for your service in the war zone and all that. And I think I had written down in my notes from before Patriot missile batteries. Was there somewhere in there in the mix?
Later on in my career. So I started out with Stinger missiles out with the divisional maneuver forces. And that's why I was with the 82nd. That's who I served with 1st Cav. With 4.5 ADA, we were actually a ground maneuver force in 2004. So we actually were a battle space controller and owner, running daily combat operations and patrols in Western Baghdad around the airport and the areas surrounding it. So interesting, completely different assignment than expected as an air defense officer, but it was really life altering and changing when it comes down to learning how to operate in complex environments, having deadlines and hard limits that you have to hit, things like that. All of that is critical to what we're doing here in the civilian world. And I want people to remember that what they don't consider important from their service can have a profound effect. When I first went into construction after I retired, everyone looked at me like, oh, this must be really difficult for you. How you dealing with high stress environments and deadlines and dealing with managing people. And I had to explain to them, like, that was what I had basically done for my entire adult life from the time I graduated and took command of my first platoon in 1999 until then. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, it's going to be the hardest job you've ever seen in your life. Well, I'm not quite sure of that. Well, yeah, it's probably doesn't compare to to try to convince the Iraqi police forces or other folks how to go about and then watch your six, the entire time. So really interesting. So it sounds like that set you up well, but you had a little bit of an intermission between, or maybe not an intermission, but a stint as a contractor before you became what you're doing now, which sounds more entrepreneurial, right? Like
Yes.
you. So tell me about the transition process,
Sure.
because I think you are probably one of the most recent veterans that we've interviewed to transition out. So a lot of the memories of myself and other people who got out 10, 15, 20 years ago are not as clear as yours. And what sort of help did you get from the Army? Was that productive? Did that lead you to Kansas City? I mean, how did you get there? That type of thing.
Sure. So I retired out of Fort Leavenworth, which sits about 40 minutes outside of Kansas City on the Kansas side. Really, my experiences with the military led me to be more entrepreneurial. And if you ask my wife, it kind of came as a surprise. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. Both my parents are retired from the Postal Service. I've got a brother that's a police officer, a brother that's a fireman. So really, business doesn't run in my family. But as I was getting out, we started a small side business because I was ready to explore, but not ready to jump in completely. So we started a self-service ice machine business. That they sit out in parking lots and just vend and sell ice, because I wanted to get into small business, but I wasn't ready to go all in. I knew I was still going to go work for somebody. But it really whet my appetite for more. So my plan was to work 10 more years, get my side businesses going, live off of that, off the money that threw off along with our retirement, and be perfectly content. But as I was leaving, and part of that was driven by the military, I wanted to have more control over my life. I was tired of ceding all control to those above me and feeling like I didn't have the ability to truly influence my situation. And then I learned, as I got into my next job, I mean, it was a great job, but I still didn't have the control over my life that I wanted. And that's what led us to this. So I wanted to be able to control my destiny more or less, and not have my decisions or my future acted on by somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's a common refrain as well. I mean, that was one of the things that led me to transition into the reserves and then ultimately to retire out of the military. I mean, the 14th trip around Cape Hatteras in the wintertime and a 40-year-old minesweeper is not the greatest, most enjoyable experience, but it made me appreciate, the life I have today a lot more. But the control is important. And, it sounds like the courage to get out and be entrepreneurial. You come from a family of service-oriented folks, right? The post office, fire department, police department, that type of thing. That sounds like perhaps that helped lead you to the military, but also the college, right?
Yes, absolutely.
IUP in Western PA. So interesting. Well, good. So let me see. You did mention, you've talked about transitioning from the service. I mean, so how did you find, I mean, was the Army in the middle? I mean, how do you find the ice machine business? Is it a franchise, sort of set up?
Yeah, it's not a franchise, but it is a company that you kind of buy into. So you have your individual owners, but you have the ability to use the brand. So we had used them when we were down in Texas. And at the time, my last job in the Army, I did a lot of traveling. And that was another thing that I told myself I didn't want to do. I had been tired of missing time at home with the family. I was traveling 2 or 3 weeks a month. And I decided that, I could have gone in and as a government contractor and done the same thing, but I was ready to move on to something different and more challenging. I think, like a lot of folks coming out, consider myself a lifelong learner, love the challenge of learning new things and implementing new processes. And that's the one thing I always enjoyed about the military is we change jobs relatively often. So I was always up for a new challenge. And you talked about Patriot missiles earlier. So I went from being a Stinger missile commander or in charge of Stinger crews to, in the second half of my career, I had to transition to Patriot, and not having been exposed to it, but now working at the battalion and brigade level, I had to learn all that on the fly and be a subject matter expert, not just for being able to overwatch and help command the formation underneath of me, as an operations officer, but I also had to be the subject matter expert, when we were in Kuwait, to the RCENT commander and things like that, when they're asking questions on what role we're going to play in the defense of Kuwait if it came to that. So I think entrepreneurship is one of those things that feeds my soul when it comes to learning, to experimenting and implementing new processes or attacking new problems. So it kind of came as a surprise to Wendy when after coming off of one of my trips, I said, "Hey, I need you to sign this bank paperwork so I can take a loan for this." And she said, "What? You're serious about this?" And I said, "Absolutely." But the one thing I tell folks, so as I talk to transitioning veterans around here, is that small side business made me a better employee because I understood the business side. So, a lot of folks getting out, we talk about, well, I was in charge of a budget of 5 million, 10 million, 100 million. But in reality, in the military, we're in charge of spending that budget, but we're not really in charge of the budget itself, right? Because we don't have to make the money to spend it. And that was a change for me. If I wanted to do anything with my construction crews, training wise or that, I had to justify it by bringing money into the company in addition to being able to spend it. And I think some folks struggle with understanding that aspect of the difference between government service and working in the civilian world.
Well, certainly cash flow is an important thing to a business, right? And sometimes you can be fooled to think fooled into thinking that, hey, I'm running this, I'm doing this, it's, I got it, I understand it and all that. And there's really a giant team of people around you that you don't see all the time that helps with your success. So being humble and understanding that, like, I think in the military, you mentioned this, a beautiful thing to say, learning to be a better employee is almost like learning to be a better leader, or how to be led, right? And how to be led, because our best leaders are not only strong and charismatic and intellectually very sharp and all that, but they're also good peer teammates as well as good followers, right? Because we all answer to somebody eventually, right? And that's an important point. So okay, so the advice really here is try things out, learn some new things that maybe you think you already know, but maybe you don't know. And if you're going to try to get into the entrepreneurial game, there are areas where you can start small, and lower risk, perhaps, right? Start small, low risk, learn some things, and then it may lead to where you're at. Ownership or co-ownership of a company, right? I see that a lot for folks that start a side hustle, as they'll call it now, or something small as their experiment to being an entrepreneur or small business. And when I was transitioning out, the programs that the Army offers now are probably very similar to the Navy and the other services. They're much better now than they were even when I got out in 2016, so just 6 years ago, as far as skill bridge and being able to get certifications based on military experience before they get out. There's a lot of programs through the SBA with Boots to Business and other organizations, nonprofit organizations, that are throwing themselves at transitioning service members, trying to help them out. The key is getting folks to understand the importance of it, to participate in it, and remember that they're going to only get out of it what they put in. So I joke that one of the reasons why I was successful when I transitioned is, one, I had a boss that gave me some free time to get myself ready to go. The second part is I just stayed on the attack. And my wife joked that she saw me more when I was in command, which was hardly at all, than she did when I was transitioning, because I spent a lot of time at different events. I basically put myself into positions where I thought I could interact with the right people in Kansas City, to make sure that I was exposing myself to as much as possible, not just to figure out what I wanted to do, but trying to build that network of folks that could assist me. And which is really key, right? I mean, I don't know if it's common sense or maybe common wisdom out there is like, okay, well, I'm going to transition out and I'm going to take the skill set that I have over here from the military, and I'm going to try to either shoehorn it or find a similar thing in the civilian world. And when that sort of evaporates because it's not really there all the
Mm-hmm.
time. Okay, now what do I do? Now I gotta, I'm out there by myself. I think what you said is really important, and probably well, you said it. One of the keys to your success is you're networking and learning at the same time. And I think that's one of the key things. Is sounds like better programs are out there, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of people want to help, but boy, the key point you said, make sure you understand what you're doing and what direction you're heading instead of just the shotgun approach or, launching off into the desert without a compass here. There are people willing to help, and the network is so important. So how did that work for you then? Did that get you into the contracting business then? Did you meet other vets or just mentors that were willing to help you? Is that how it worked?
So the interesting aspect of that is how it, we talk about accident ladders and each rung plays a role in everything. Well, for me, the networking and the job search thing is very similar. So I ended up with two job offers before I ended up retiring. One, do a data mining for a medical organization, which, didn't have me super excited, but, was definitely, I was, privileged to have multiple offers. The other one, with the company I ended up working for, came through the network. So the first one came completely off of a blind application off of LinkedIn for the project manager for the data mining. The other one, I was at a networking event in town. I ran into my banker who had financed me for the ice machines, who I didn't at the time want to tell that I was in the process of transitioning because he was about to give me a loan for a business for someone that didn't have any business experience. I didn't want to bring, kind of rub in the fact that I was about to not
scare him away, right?
To not have a job. You know what I mean? I ran into him and he started talking. He asked what I was doing. I told him I was in the process of transitioning, looking for a position. He then asked me to send him my resume. He then sent it to the president of the company that ended up hiring me. So all these things, the network is key, because if I didn't know him from my small business loan, I never would have talked to him that day, which wouldn't have led to my resume getting to the president of that company, which means I wouldn't have met my current partner in the business I'm in now.
No, without a doubt, right? I mean, I think the network is as probably more important than anything else. They say it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes.
Right. So what kind of gets you to the party and is your fundamental competency. But in any job, you're going to have to learn it no matter what it is, unless it's an exact duplicate of what you were doing before. And that rarely happens, especially if you're looking for new stuff. So really, really important on the networking. Fantastic, explanation of your experience and how you got there. So thank you for that. What role did maintenance and reliability play for you, Dave, in the Army and your understanding of how, things are working today and what you're doing today?
So, much no different than you guys with your ships. Being in the counter missile, counter aircraft role, everything is high tech. It's complex. As a brand new platoon leader, I had 4 Avenger weapon systems that were, had to be maintained along with our normal complement of vehicles. So building the processes and the mindset of maintaining all of that equipment on a regular basis so it was ready to go at any time, especially when I was down the 82nd, we did our share of rotations where we were on 2-hour recall. So we had 2 hours from notification to be back at the unit ready to go. And then the first equipment or troops were moving 18 hours after notification, where the goal was to have the first aircraft wheels up. So that stuff had to be ready to go at all times. It got even more important as I moved up and we got into Patriot missiles and the radars. And I mean, reliability and maintenance was how we were judged. So if your equipment wasn't working, if your troops couldn't perform their mission, then you weren't an asset. So all that stuff just becomes critical and key to not just to daily operations, but to being able to force project. All that, came out and plays a role in everything that I do today, whether it was when I was doing HVAC and plumbing on construction projects, whether it was our technicians giving maintenance onto commercial buildings with their rooftop units or their plumbing systems, Maintenance is maintenance. No one thinks about it or cares about it until it typically stops working.
Right.
Other than the maintenance people.
Yeah.
So, but just trying to enhance, make folks realize why the importance of that is key. And we talk to our commercial customers all the time. It's cheaper for them to pay us to help maintain their systems than it is for them to come pay us to replace systems. So I would rather set up a solid preventive maintenance plan on the HVAC, the plumbing, the refrigeration, and go see them a couple of times a year and not get a big ticket item, as much as, I as a business owner want that. But when do those things break? They break when we're busy. They break when everyone in town is having the same issues because it's 105 degrees and all the rooftop units are going down all over town, or everyone's, home AC systems are failing. And if we had been doing proper preventive maintenance and focusing on a lot of that ahead of time, we could have identified those issues significantly earlier. And I'd much rather change someone's air conditioning or the rooftop unit in a shoulder season so that's ready to go during heating or cooling season than have to worry about, can I get the equipment? Are we backed up? Can I get them up and operational at that time? So
Interesting. So maintenance is really literally a profit center for you.
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not a cost center. And we tried to, at least when I was doing the reliability consulting program, express that to leadership at facilities, whether they're, an office building or plant production facility, then the maintenance really is the profit center. And you've turned that into reality. And I mean, what impact has COVID had on your business with the shortage of parts and supplies? I mean, it's probably become even more important, I would suspect.
It has. So, and we try to explain that to a lot of folks now. Like, we'd much rather start replacing things on a, we like to help maintenance directors or business owners develop a CapEx plan to replace things gradually, or when they're getting towards the end of life cycle. Because right now, you're absolutely correct. Sometimes things are super hard to find. Parts may be available. They may not be available when that item breaks. So it hasn't been too significant for us because most of what we're dealing with is pretty common as far as equipment, but we have run into a handful of things in the last 12 months where I'm waiting for an electrical part that was supposed to be here 3 months or 2 months ago. But when we first ordered it, it was a 3-month lead time for me to get that equipment put together and assembled and then ready for installation. So
it's interesting that, COVID has introduce some adversity into the just-in-time supply chain around the world, which, it's not the same as being in a war zone, which you've done. I've never done, but it starts blending a little bit, because if somebody's using a truck as their means of income and the truck goes down, you can't get another one for another year, then that's literally potentially a life and death situation, right? Yeah, I mean,
yes.
some of these things, and I mean, perhaps if, hospital AC goes down or anything like that. My wife works at UK Healthcare here in Lexington. I mean, that can be ultra critical, and that's where I think society or the corporate community in general needs folks like military veterans that can handle the stress and that can deal with the adversity and get through and smile and get on the other side and say, hey, this is nothing. You were over in Afghanistan and Iraq. It can always be worse.
Exactly. We're also starting to see a trend as far as maintenance goes, where property management companies or commercial buildings are carrying significantly less maintenance staff than they used to in-house, partly for a few reasons. One, it is an added cost that they have to keep up, whether there's something to fix or something not to fix that day. That is still a cost to the organization. And we're just seeing a significantly lower availability of folks that feel comfortable or are even capable of accomplishing a lot of those tasks. So we are seeing a lot more outsourcing of maintenance for those reasons, where your maintenance director may be someone that's more of an administrative role for for coordinating maintenance than an actual, what we would consider like a stationary engineer or someone that could directly fix the items themselves. It's getting harder and harder to find folks that are capable of doing a wide variety of tasks or trades because we just don't have that depth in those organizations like we used to.
Interesting. And I'm not sure how the Army does it, but most people in the Navy, and I suspect it's the same across the services, all understand basic maintenance. They may not be able to fix an air conditioner by themselves or anything like that, but there are people in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard that can do that and understand how to read a maintenance card and actually go do and perform the service, because there is. And I work mostly in the trucking industry now, though I am relatively sure it's similar out there in plant maintenance as well, that, hey, it's the graying of society. Most maintainers are in their 50s or 60s. Young kids aren't getting into it. Guess what? There are 200,000 veterans getting off of active duty every year, transitioning into the civilian world. Great place to find folks with that experience, as well as some leadership.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I tell folks all the time, either, building maintenance, facilities operations, obviously the trades. I used to do a lot of workforce development with the high schools around here, with one of the organizations I belong to, Associated Builders and Contractors, trying to explain the opportunity that exists out there right now. And you're right, there's a lot of positions, at least at the entry level, that our military, specifically our junior NCOs, our junior officers could transition directly into, that may feel like it doesn't have as much of a title that as they think they may want, but they're not looking towards the long term of what the capabilities are. And honestly, part of it is because there's so few people out there doing it that they don't even know that is even a viable career, if that makes sense.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so not only in filling positions that are currently open, and that's another low risk off ramp. You talked about the ice machine business, but another low risk off ramp is getting into an organization, maybe in an entry level position or a lower position than you may feel like you're qualified for coming out of the service, but to get started, right? To get started, to get your situational awareness, learn more about the business with somebody else's money, perhaps.
Yes.
Right. Or just a little bit of your own money. And then, in that way you can, take those learnings in whatever direction you want to as a next step. So Interesting. So you mentioned some volunteer work. So you do that with local high schools. Is that what, or
yes.
Yeah.
So we had a workforce development program, with Associated Builders and Contractors, which is a group of contractors, and then an industry specific group. But we used to do a lot of workforce development, trying to explain to folks the needs of the trades, the capabilities, and the opportunities that were out there. Specifically with a lot of our urban high schools here in the Kansas City metro area, where a lot of folks don't feel like they have a lot of opportunity to them because they either can't or don't want to go to college. But trying to explain to them that there's a significant opportunity for them to excel in life. Some of them, could literally change their station in life in some ways, and be possibly the first really successful person in their family if they were put themselves to it, because of the opportunity that exists to them. So.
Interesting. I know that the Dixon Center is working with the Teamsters, and I suspect there's other unions, contractors, and stuff like that are able to facilitate and maybe even use the Skill Bridge program. And for folks who are listening, if they're not familiar with Skill Bridge, and I just have a cursory familiarity, but I think it's a great program. I think up to 6 months before you transition off of active duty, you can get involved with Skill Bridge certified companies, and they'll take you in. The military pays your salary, but these folks will, bring you in sort of on a trial basis, right?
It's almost like a paid internship.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah. So paid internship. And if you decide to stay, you stay. If you don't, you don't. But I think it's a great opportunity to not make the common misstep of jumping into the wrong job right out of the service because we don't know, right? Or we don't
Yes.
get networked, or we don't get the right mentoring that helps us land in the spot, or we settle, or whatever,
Hmm.
because it seems pretty common. I lasted in my first job for about 4.5 years out of the service. Maybe that's a little longer than what normally happens, but I think the average rate is less than 2 years for that first job.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was at mine for 4 before we
Mm.
started this company. But yeah, we see that a lot. I see people feel like they have to settle. And I think we all hit you have that make or break point when in your transition, when you say, yeah, I either got to take something or I don't. The one thing I don't see folks coming off a good job, and I think we could do a better job as the Department of Defense, is, you know, folks coming off of out of the military have a lot of skills. But I don't think we stress enough that it's not the skills that they have. It's they have to go out and find the jobs there. The jobs exist. And I tell folks here in Kansas City that are getting ready to retire or transition out, literally, there's not a better job market than right now in the Kansas City market to cut out and find a very good paying job that can meet a lot of their, not just their financial needs, but their emotional needs, their physical needs, whatever they're looking for. But they have to go find it. If you're going to sit up on the post or the base and wait for these opportunities to come to you, they're not going to happen. If you think you're just going to sit in front of a computer and just click on things, you may get it, but you bring the luck that you get, or if that makes sense. So you've got to go out and find the positions, and it's about no one really cares what you've done necessarily, but they want to know what the skills and experience that you have, how they're going to benefit the company. You've got to sell yourself to the company on how you're going to provide opportunity to them. A lot of times your veteran status can get you a foot in the door, but it's not going to sell the job by itself. You have to come in and explain to them why. And I think that's a transition some folks struggle with coming out, because up to this point, the Army's always picked their jobs for them. They've always sent them somewhere.
Right.
They've always put them in those positions based on their skills and experience that they've had in the past. But really, the next step is you have to tell a company what you bring for them and why they should hire you.
Increase your surface area of luck.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the intersection of preparation and opportunity. I have a few a few sayings that I like to bring out on that. But yeah, if you don't poke your nose out there and get after it, talk to people, figure out what's going on, your chances go down quite a bit. And there are a lot of people who want to help, right? It's not what you see on the news, or the negativity and everybody yelling at each other. I mean, really, there's a tremendous amount of what I can see, a desire to help, especially veteran to veteran. I mean, if you can find somebody at a VFW or a VSO or even at the Chamber of Commerce, or just general networking, you can buddy up and, you might have a friend for life.
No, absolutely.
So it sounds like you've covered the advice on for any service member transitioning to the civilian world. Anything else to add on that?
I would just say, look at all the opportunities in the programs that exist, and don't be afraid. If you're getting out and you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing the boat. I mean, you have to leverage the technology that's out there, because networking today is not just a matter of handshaking. And I know networking typically gets a bad kind of a bad vibe from folks, because they think of it as, I'm just going to go out there and pass out business cards to somebody. And really, it's about relationships. Our whole business right now has been built off of relationships. I was a learned extrovert from being an officer in the Army. So it's not how I recharge, but I can operate in that environment when I have to. And simple things that I did to get myself ready is I would just sign myself up for random networking events. And I'd go there and I'd say, listen, I'm not leaving this event until I have 5 meaningful conversations with someone, or I get 5 business cards from someone beyond just in passing, because I was forcing myself to learn how to small talk, how to introduce myself, how to maintain a conversation and get deeper than just, hey, how are you today, and moving on to the next person. And those skills that I developed doing a lot of that really made a significant impact in my ability to operate as a senior level leader in a civilian organization, and now as a business owner. And what's funny is some of those relationships that I made at those random things, I actually just walked a job with a subcontractor yesterday who was a person that I met at one of those events when I was first transitioning out. So the one thing don't get used to, or it was new for me, was after having moved around every 2 to 3 years, I wasn't used to having a community or a group of people that I interacted with on an ongoing basis with different organizations that can leverage, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the local VFW, whether it's whatever organization you have. My wife and I had never been a part of a community long enough to ever become a significant part of those. And it's been an interesting aspect because I see the confluence of those organizations and my business and everything else all coming together in ways that I never really expected, because we had never really operated in a community long enough to really feel that come together.
These are not things that you learn from a book.
No,
I mean, these are not things that you're going to learn in school. I mean, they're absolutely sort of tribal knowledge or human knowledge passed down through stories, and that's why we're doing this, right? That's why. So this is beautiful. I mean, that's 5 contacts. You don't have to go into a networking thing like a banshee and pretend that you're a used car salesman or do what you think you've seen on the Wolf of Wall Street, where you're talking to everybody. As soon as I meet you, I've forgotten your name because I'm looking to the next person that I need to meet. Man, everybody's got a story. Just sit back and enjoy the ride and learn about people, man. Listening is such a lot. It's becoming a lost art. And one of the reasons why I do this, because I love hearing your story. I mean, I'm genuinely interested in how you got where you are today and in sharing those things. I love the learned extrovert, because I mean, I probably had some of that too. Coming out and standing before your department or your division in the morning and being the youngest guy there and the wettest behind the ears guy there, and still having to deliver the word of the day and the instructions for the day, and here's what we're going to do, and they're like, yes sir, yeah, we hear you, we're going to go ahead and do what we need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll teach you along the way too. Yeah. But in the community thing, I think is really important, because I think there's a tendency perhaps to not get as close as you could to the outside the service community, because I mean, everybody within the service maybe in your neighborhood, wherever it is, at Fort Leavenworth or in Norfolk or San Diego. Okay, the Navy people, you have the same trials and tribulations. People are getting deployed, people are here, there, and everywhere. And there can be a reluctance, because you're moving in 2 years, to get close to your neighbor and to get close in the community. And man, when those shackles are off, so to speak, or when you're on your own, you need to be part of a community. You need to belong, because that's really where it's at. And I mean, I also enjoyed the metaphor or the example that you use, that you can't get there by sitting behind a computer screen and clicking. This world's becoming more computer oriented and automated, but we're still human beings. And people aren't going to hire you if they don't get a good feeling, trust, and you really can't, I don't think, get that through. I mean, these meetings are okay, right? But person-to-person contact, there's some sort of under the surface vibration that we all pick up when we're with each other that says, yeah, this is a good guy, good girl, not so sure, need to dig in a little bit more. But
absolutely.
Great advice, Dave. So how about for people who are hiring vets, what sort of wisdom or guidance would you give to corporate hiring managers about veterans they need to know to get the best fits?
Yeah, in my experience, the hard skills are important, but oftentimes you have to take a look. So good example. So we've really been struggling to hire some more general maintenance technicians. And honestly, we're at the point now where we're looking for someone we think can interact well with the customers, that has a basic mechanical knowledge that we can teach the skills to, because we can't find the folks that we really want. And I would say the same thing for corporate hiring managers. Look for the person that has the soft skills that you think you need, and then focus on teaching the hard skills. So when they hired me, at the mechanical contractor, I didn't know anything other than, when you flush the toilet, plumbing goes, and when I crank the thermostat, it either gets hot or cold.
Right.
But they brought me in because they had a lot of technical experts, but they didn't have anyone that was experienced at running organizations. So they really brought me in just to kind of manage the personnel, to deal with the HR stuff. But in the end, I ended up by doing the same thing that you and I did as leaders in the military. I would ask my HVAC guys, what is this? Why does this do this? When I look at the blueprints, what does this symbol mean? When you're installing this, why is it this way? To the point where I became knowledgeable enough that I then became the subject matter expert, because let's face it, to be a subject matter expert, you just have to know a little bit more than the folks that you're talking to. Right. But, so that I could pinch hit as a project manager on mechanical or plumbing projects. And that just came from interacting with them and learning them. And it wasn't because I came in there as an engineer, and I didn't come in there as a HVAC installer, but I was able to use those soft skills that I had learned in the military from managing folks to get my folks that work for me on my side and feel comfortable with me, so that they felt like investing in me also, in passing their knowledge on. And no different than being on the ship and asking, your petty officers what they're doing and what role is this player, why is this part of the ship important when you first arrive, as you're getting qualified, or for me, why is this $200,000 part of the Patriot radar so important, and what can we do to make sure that we're not burning them out faster than we are? The knowledge base resides in the technical experts. Most of us are generalists, and the hard skills can be taught, because they are a specific thing. As you know, it's the soft skills, it's the people interaction, it's the ability to manage folks effectively that are the hardest things to teach. And that's where I think where we're struggling. So we've got a lot of technical knowledge folks coming out of colleges right now, but whether it's because of COVID, whether it's because of the dependence on digital aspects of communication, we're losing the ability for folks to interact on a face-to-face basis, or have the empathy or sympathy that goes along with being a leader. And sometimes, as you know, leaders eat last, and they put in the longer hours than those around them. And we're running into folks that just don't understand that, because they haven't been trained that way or brought up the same way you and I were. So.
Sure, I'm sure it's still a big part of the military, and just how things are done there. And we're at work where I'm at. We've been looking at the Lencioni books, the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and the Hungry, Humble, and Smart Ideal Team Player. Wow, how impactful is it for you to say, look at the soft skills first? I mean, how many people out there are just grading resumes and looking at the, okay, well, they have a degree, or they've done this technically, they've got an MBA, they got this, okay, they're in, let's hire them, they look like a good candidate, when in fact, it's the face-to-face. In your opinion, what you're saying, and I believe it 100%, is that the soft skills are really what are in the highest demand. And as you've articulated, you can teach the hard stuff. Fantastic. Yeah. Take care of your people will take care of you. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So is there anything else we didn't cover today, Dave, that you'd like to relate to our listeners?
Sure. So the last thing that is the newest venture for me is the nonprofit called Bunker Labs.
Okay. Fantastic.
National organization with local chapters, and right now in the most of the major metropolitan areas across the U.S. I can't remember how many there are. We're just kicking off the one here in Kansas City, but it's designed to assist veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs on establishing and growing their businesses. So, small business and entrepreneurship has been good to me. It has helped drive me in my post transition life, and keep me going. And I want to assist other people with that too. So the nice part is we talk about it being nationally connected, but locally thriving. So it's run at both the national and the local level. And what I like is We can help folks here in the Kansas City market connect amongst our networks as we share that amongst each other. But at the same time, if there's someone doing something very similar or to what someone here in Kansas City is doing and they're not sure how to scale it, I can connect them to an entrepreneur, whether they're in New Jersey, whether they're in Seattle, and they can share those lessons learned and some of their trials and tribulations on what got them there to help them grow their business. And then the other thing that we're seeing a lot more of, and which I think is exciting, is entrepreneurship through acquisition. So those of you that have been around the business world for a while know, as you've mentioned about the maintenance folks, whether it's contractors, whether it's suppliers, the owners are graying. They're getting to the point where a lot of them are ready to retire. They don't have anyone to pass it on to because either they don't have anyone in the family that wants the business or they're just not interested in it. But we're seeing a lot of military folks, specifically in, I'd say, mid and senior level NCOs or mid and senior level officers that are used to coming into organizations that they're not familiar with, but that are running effectively or efficiently and coming in and maintaining that and finding ways to grow it. And we're starting to see more of that here in Kansas City and across the country, where you may not have to have the great idea on how to start a company, but you can purchase a company from someone that's retiring, and then just take it over and run it. And what better way to get into the business world, to make that transition where you can be your own boss, but not have to start from scratch, by acquiring a business that's already existing. So.
Great advice. Great advice. So Bunker Labs, national nonprofit then? Are you a peer coach or what's your role?
So it's a national. I'm considered a city ambassador here in Kansas City, along with a few other folks here. And really the goal is just we say it's two things. There's two issues that we need to bridge with the veteran entrepreneur community. One is the network, which we've talked about, and network. Without a network, you never be successful in business or growing in the civilian world. And two is funding. So those are the two issues that we're trying to help veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs overcome. So.
Fantastic. What a great organization. And you're certainly a great patriot for fulfilling that role as a volunteer city ambassador. I'm really glad. I know we spoke about it last time. It's in my notes, but if you wouldn't have brought it up, we wouldn't have covered it today. And I think that's a nice bonus for anybody listening in and thinking about either starting their own business. I hadn't ever actually thought about this entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is another really, really great idea. And it makes total sense once you hear it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't even anything I had really thought about, but until I started to see it myself. But it makes complete sense because you've got folks that are coming out, may not have a ton of liquid capital to start a business, but they have a lot of collateral to put up in order to get a loan, whether it's from the SBA or from a bank or from an owner financed organization. And it's not any dissimilar to them moving on to their next ship or their next unit. They're coming into an existing organization that already has processes and procedures. They're falling in on those, maintaining them and finding ways to make it better. So no different than what we do in the military.
Interesting. That's great advice. Wow. What a nugget coming on to July 4th. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. So is there anything else we didn't cover? I mean, that's a golden nugget for the podcast, I think, anyway. Yeah. So thank you very much for that.
Of course, I would close by just saying, I encourage everyone that's transitioning or has transitioned previously. So the other thing that we're focused on here from our position at Bunker Labs in Kansas City is a lot of times we focus on the transitioning veterans, but we forget about the ones that have transitioned before, or the ones that may not even consider themselves veterans. And not in a bad way, but if someone did 3 years in the Army or the Navy 20 years ago, they don't define themselves necessarily as a veteran on a day-to-day basis. And we want to remind them that this is still a community that they're a part of. This is a community that we can all assist each other on, and they should be proud of their service. And let's find ways for everyone to work together. And don't get disheartened. You can't, whether it's, you're in the process of transitioning, you don't feel like the jobs are coming together, you can't get the interviews. You just have to keep plugging along, building that network and finding those around you that can assist you. So.
All great points. Well said, Dave. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today on this mission. Yeah. So if people want to reach out to you, get a hold of you, you're available on LinkedIn, or is that the best place?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. Dave Vodarick on there. Look for BV Contracting Solutions. Feel free to email me, message me on there. I'd love to connect with anybody. So.
Fantastic. So before we wrap things up, I just want to remind our listeners to give us a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this, I enjoyed it. I'd give you a 5-star rating right now, and it will really help us out. So thank you, Dave. And thanks to Mobius for providing this platform to help both transitioning vets as well as those looking to hire them in the field of maintenance and reliability. Have a great 4th of July weekend. Well done, sir. And thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Veterans Connected. We will see you back for another episode very soon. In between, we hope to see you in the Veterans Connected community group where you can meet Eric and fellow podcast guests and share with other industry veterans at mobiusconnect.com. And we hope to see you there.